The Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, Week 9, DraftKings picks and preview. If you out there want to get into a draw for $20 DK dollars, here's what you do. You smash the like button for the episode, you leave your DraftKings handle in the comment section, and tell me, if James Conner sits this week, Jalen Samuels, $4,000. If you were to play 10 lineups, how many would involve Jalen Samuels at $4,000? Because that's going to be a discussion this week that I think people are going to have. Are you going to be all in or all out? Or are you going to be like 3 of 10? And that just might not be enough. We'll end up seeing how this week shakes out. I'm very curious to see the responses on this one. The other ways to do so is subscribe, rate, review, and then leave a 5-star review, DraftKings handle, and something nice about the Pat Mayo Experience for the audio version podcast. Best currency this podcast can have are those reviews from the people. You'll be in a draw for 20 DK bucks and play in the Pat Mayo Experience Listeners League. The link is in the description of this podcast or video. $15 to play, no rake, 3 max entry, $45,000 of guaranteed money, $5,000 to the winner. It's the best tournament on DraftKings. Fill that up quickly. Maybe we can expand it. That'd be a huge comeback. It started big. It started at like 5,000. It dropped down to 3,000. It's filled every single week. But if we can get like more momentum earlier in the week, we can juice up that rake-free pool of money on DraftKings. Folks, we want that. And it's a min cash, double your payout. And you see very few tournaments actually structured like that. That's what no rake can bring. You can sustain yourself in this tournament over time. Even if you just cash 1 of 3. I mean, instead of losing $45, you lose $15. And then you have 2 more entries for next week. It's fine. So it's the best tournament on DraftKings. Play in that. Plus, my pals over at EstablishTheRun.com, Silva, Levy, Thorman, Josh, all those good guys, they have a special code for viewers of the Pat Mayo Experience. If you use promo code MAYO20 at checkout at EstablishTheRun.com, you get yourself 20% off. So, hey, it's a very valuable tool. I love using it. I think you guys should give it a checkout as well. EstablishTheRun.com. Ben Rasa from Awesemo.com is on the line, another place where I have a subscription. Ben, tell people did they have any sort of code out there to join Awesemo?
We certainly do. We got a lot of things going on now. We got basketball and whatnot. Easiest one, you can use my code, JazzRaz, 50% off your first month. We have all different packages, and certainly all Alex's tools behind the paywall are some of the best in the business. Well,
let's dig in to week 9. I want to have a good week. I mean, I guess I should probably say you had a very good week 8. Tell the people.
I did. Wasn't perfect. It never is. But yeah, I had a real good lineup in some higher stakes things. I got the one-offs. That's really what it's about. I had Mike Evans and Galladay. Although my Titan stack wasn't great, it had Corey Davis in it, which was obviously a terrible play with the results he put up. But I was able to take down some good cash, have my best week of the year. So happy about that. And we're now I got the Mayo bump. Things are looking up in my world here.
So it's funny. I was talking to you on Sunday, and like you were very, very tilted about Corey Davis. And
I was a little salty. Yeah,
you're a bit salty. So what were the scenarios? Because what'd you end up coming second in that contest?
I did.
So what was first prize in that contest?
So the first prize was, it was a couple different things I was a little tilted about. First prize was $40K. I came in second for 25. I got passed by a Tevin Coleman team, which was a little tilting just to see him explode. 3 touchdowns wouldn't have caught me, but 4 did it. The other thing that I was the most upset about was that, I made a decision to play in the 100-man higher stakes tournament over the luxury box, which is 350 people. Usually I pick one of those in play, and somehow I would have won the luxury box going away. But the 100-man tournament, I came in second. So that was just an outlier and kind of annoying. But you know what? It's hard to complain when you have a good week, and that's certainly what I had.
Yeah, I think that's the positive spin to put on it. Like, I hear a lot of people be like, even like someone who came second in my contest, they were winning the entire time, and they dropped down to second at the very, very end. It's like, oh, I just lost $2,000. Like, you came second in the tournament. If I had told you coming into the week you came second and won $3K, I think you'd be pretty happy with that. I know it's tilting in the moment. Maybe that's why it's just best to look at it after the games are done.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I don't have the willpower to do that, but that's what you probably should do. And I think that's what you just said is the thing. Initially, yeah, I felt, I lost 175K if I did this. And if Corey Davis wasn't an idiot, I would have had this. But then when the dust settles, you look back and you say, you know what, that's a good week. That's, some extra runway for the end of the year. And we have a whole new slate to attack in week 9.
So at the running back position, last week, there was basically no one who anyone felt comfortable below $4,900 playing at running back. That was Ty Johnson, who turned out to be awful. But still, people felt like okay about playing Ty Johnson until Kamara was declared officially out. Then everyone just kind of found the money to move up to Latavius Murray. Worked out really well. But now looking at the bottom this week of running back, Jalen Samuels is $4,000. James Conner's iffy to play. That's going to be an early game on Sunday, so we're going to know if Connor is active or inactive before that. I said the question for the giveaways was, out of 10 lineups, how many would you play Jalen Samuels in? I think the answer for me, if James Conner is out, is 10.
So I think that's a really reasonable answer. He's low priced. We'll see if Snell might be hurt as well. He could have the backfield to himself. We know he can do a lot of different things. He can catch the ball, which that makes it even less likely that he completely whiffs just because of the PPR floor. He's going to be very popular, as we know, but we also, look at Latavius Murray. He was so popular, and he was a staple of basically every lineup last week. So to get leverage, you're going to need a lot. And if you really want to lock him in, I see no problem doing that if we get word Connor's out.
The one difference this week as opposed to last week is, there are multiple pay down options, none in as good of a spot as Samuel's. Like the Colts have the 29th ranked run defense per DVOA. They should be able, and they have a good offensive line as well, that they should be able to somewhat effectively run the ball. But if they do fall behind, we know that's probably even more valuable for Jalen Samuels because he is such a good pass catcher that he has the best scenario if Connor is out of any of these low priced running backs. However, you do have a situation where Adrian Peterson is down there at $4,200. He was banged up last Thursday night and still looked pretty good against a good run defense for the Vikings. The Bills on paper have a very good defense, but they can be taken up the middle. We saw Jordan Howard do that last week. I don't know if the Skins can get the push or have the game script to actually pull this off, but he's in play at least. I probably won't use him, but I think that he's in play at $4,200. Tariq Cohen against Philly. They have a good pass rush and are terrible in the receiving game. Logically, that makes a lot of sense, and you know that he's going to do his damage through the air. He might not get the goal line touches, which brings him down behind someone like Samuels or Peterson in that sense, unless he can break a big one. But also, Mark Walton is $4,500. He's playing the Jets, whose defense is atrocious. They're only 3-point dogs at home this week, and everyone just kind of watched him not perform on Monday night against the Steelers. The Steelers' run defense is really, really good. He played over 80% of the snaps. It's very unlikely that you're going to find that sort of volume from any player, almost ever, that isn't just a random injury replacement, which Walton isn't, at $4,500 and below. I don't really know what to make of Walton. I know he gets involved in the passing game. I know Balaj has been used as their goal line back, but if he's going to see 20 touches against the Jets, which isn't like his range of outcomes and like a good range of outcomes, I have some interest, I think.
I have a little. You mentioned 6 targets, over double-digit carries. That's the volume we want. Spread-wise, this is as good as you're going to find with Miami. They're still a dog at home, but it's supposed to be a competitive game. I worry a little bit. The Jets' run defense isn't certainly not the weak link of that team. They have a bunch of problems. That's not one of them, but I think you can justify it based on the volume. And if you want to one-off a guy like Samuels, you'll get a fraction of the ownership on someone like Walton. Probably I have him ahead of guys like AP and other guys you could look to in this range.
Yeah, the only other guy is Frank Gore against Washington. People won't use Gore because they look at the snap shares from a week ago, see that Singletary played 71% of the snaps for the Bills, but they were trailing the entire game, and that's going to be what happens when the game script works against the Bills, that Singletary, the better pass-catching back, is going to be on the field. Gore is going to be on the sidelines. But they're 9.5-point favorites this week. I think that's probably a bit too much, but this game will at least be close. I doubt Washington wins by 20. So if it remains within a score either way, then Gore's going to have a chance to really beat up on a bad run defense, and they give him the ball over and over. You just worry about Josh Allen stealing his touchdowns. But I think that he, like Adrian Peterson, is in play. I don't think he's as good of a play as Samuels and or Walton, but I think that there is touchdown upside for him. Like, Gore could get 22 carries in this game for 110 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, that's on the table.
So that, yeah, I mean, those guys are in the same bucket. They need the right game script, whereas Walton and certainly Jalen Samuels, there's basically no scenario where they're phased out. With the Redskins and the Bills, if one of the teams gets up, most likely it'll be Buffalo. the opposing running back is going to have a big problem contributing because they're not really valuable, in a pass catching role.
Exactly. So if those are the pay down options, let's go to the very top. Christian McCaffrey, Ben, it's finally happened. Christian McCaffrey comes in at $10,000 on DraftKings this week. Dalvin Cook is $9,500. Then it's all the way down to Bell, then Connor, who's questionable. He may or may not play. Chubb, Carson, Aaron Jones, that's the 7K range. Then below that, you have Josh Jacobs, Marlon Mack, and Austin Eckler. That's your $6,000 range of running backs. So you can really pick and choose here. Like, obviously, McCaffrey is the top play because he's the top player in fantasy, whether it's season long or on DraftKings. Tougher matchup against the Titans, but I don't really sweat matchups with Christian McCaffrey. And you can get to him this week. Even at $10,000, there's enough pay down options that it's not the end of the world. What do you suppose the ownership gap between McCaffrey and Dalvin Cook is going to be?
I don't think it's going to be massive, to be honest. Dalvin Cook has certainly a better matchup against the Chiefs, and we've seen him also. Now, McCaffrey is just at a different level, and I think everyone acknowledged that. Even last week, it felt like he did nothing, and he still wound up with 30. But unless guys like Connor, if Connor's ruled out, that's certainly going to have a direct correlation to McCaffrey ownership because guys like Samuels are going to be necessary for those lineups.
So let's say James Conner is active. Would you just use the pay down option of Mark Walton then?
I still would go to that, but I don't think nearly as many people are going to build with that in mind. Whereas I feel like with injuries, it's so much more, in people's minds, like, all right, Connor's out, got to go get that backup. Whereas Mark Walton, as you said, Drake is gone. It's not an injury situation. So I don't think it's going to have nearly as much ownership if Walton is the pay down option.
What do you make of the middle range here? So you look at someone like Chris Carson. Tampa has the best run defense in the league. That doesn't mean that Seattle's not going to use Chris Carson on the ground because they love to run. Maybe they'll just use him through the air. But the two that stick out to me as maybe the three best plays. I'm looking at Nick Chubb at Denver. I'm looking at Aaron Jones at the Chargers and Josh Jacobs against the Lions. With the Raiders being a favorite in this game, I do find somewhat intriguing. It's not like Detroit's run defense is like pretty blah. It's just below average. It could be good on a given week. I guess if Mike Daniels returns this week and pair him up with Snacks Harrison, then obviously it's a bit of a tougher task. But Josh Jacobs just looks good.
Yeah, and he's going to get a ton of work. The Raiders haven't had a home game since week 2, so they're back in the friendly environment. And like you said, they are a slight favorite, so it's very possible we see 20 plus carries. He's scoring dependent somewhat just because he's not a big pass catcher, but this is a range I also plan to attack. You mentioned Chubb. Aaron Jones has been phenomenal. Gets a matchup against the Chargers defense that's just not nearly as good as I thought they were going to be. So you can look to them. God, do I even mention Le'Veon Bell? Is that a thing?
Here's the biggest issue with Le'Veon Bell, that when Sam Darnold is the quarterback, Spooky Sam, that he doesn't throw to the running backs. Like, he's awful at screen passes. Like I mentioned this to Cust on the spread show, that it's like when you're playing Madden sometimes and there's like a shorter pass that you want to do, you just kind of like, you don't press down X the entire way. It's like a half touch and it's like a little bit of a lob. Darnold just holds down X and throws it as hard as he can at his running backs who are like 3 feet away from him. Like, he's just not good at it.
They need to, it feels, not to play narratives, but it just feels like Bell has to get some work. And I mean, I watched the Jets. I'm a New York person. They got to get him more than 5 targets a game. He needs, especially when they're trailing. Like, I don't understand that. I know Darnold's not good at it, but they have to find ways to get Le'Veon Bell more than, low double-digit touches in a game. So I think he's going to be natural leverage in terms of ownership, but clearly there's better guys above and below him in terms of salary.
Yeah, I don't think that he's that far off from those other guys, though. Like, his price point isn't great. Obviously, it's more expensive, and that will naturally keep a lot of people off of him. But if you factor in that Chubb will likely be popular, or Aaron Jones or Josh Jacobs and McCaffrey and Cook will all be popular, and Le'Veon Bell, with all the stuff just swirling around this week, like you talked about the narrative, like, narrative isn't good to put into analysis of how performance actually works. But I think when we talk about narratives as it pertains to DraftKings ownership, that's a bit of a different story because this week has squashed the narrative around the Jets, and the narrative about them wanting to get rid of Bell squashes his narrative. But what's the reality of the situation? It's still a running back who's probably going to play 90% of his team snaps with the best matchup of the week.
That's right. And I'm in total agreement that yes, narratives certainly play more role in what people are, groupthink and ownership, and we have to take advantage of that when we can. I may look to him in certain capacity. The question, depending on how much value opens up, I don't know if you're going to be able to comfortably get him and Cook or him and McCaffrey if you really want to pay up for two of the big three.
That's interesting. I was able to make lineups last week. Like my most successful lineups were my Barkley McCaffrey lineups. So yeah. I think it's doable. Like if you went McCaffrey, Bell, Samuels, or McCaffrey, Bell, Walton, like you're not loving what you have at the other positions, but I feel like it's easier to make up value at receiver than it is at running back most of the time.
Certainly. And as we'll, when we get to quarterbacks and stuff, one of the things just going backwards last week for me, I was able to really, I had a lot of Titan stacks, and although it didn't work out great, the great thing about it was in terms of salary allocated for my 3-man, Tannehill, Jonnu Smith, Corey Davis, it allowed me to pay up for like Hopkins, Evans, Golladay, top end guys basically across the board. So if you get another cheap stack, you can have the luxury of taking, optimal top end running backs to fill out the rest of the roster.
If you plug in McCaffrey and Bell, and then you put in, let's say Connor is active, and so Mark Walton's the cheap guy that you pay down for, you still have $4,600 left. Yeah,
so you just, especially, you get the way DraftKings has done, not that it's an automatic, but they have defenses now sub 2K in some weeks. It was certainly a lot of defenses in the 2K range that are playable. That's some salary relief right off the top.
Listen, I'm not going to lie to you. The Redskins defense is $1,800. They're the cheapest one on this slate. They're playing the Bills. Like you can play the Redskins defense this week.
Absolutely. No doubt about it.
Yep. I wonder if they'll be popular because of that.
Being the only team that's sub 2K, they're not going to be, I wouldn't say chalk by any stretch, but they're going to have some ownership. No doubt about it.
All right, so the rest of the running backs, we drop below. Do you have interest in like the Max and Ecklers? Because I don't really. I'd rather either pay up or pay down.
Yeah, not really. It's a pretty dead range. For me, looking down, I looked at like Eckler. I want to buy on Melvin Gordon, but I don't think I'm going to get there once again.
This is a good week to do it for Melvin Gordon. You have the offensive coordinator change, and maybe that limits what he does in the offense. Who knows? But he's still getting all the goal line work, and the Packers' run defense isn't good.
No, that's the way to attack them. I mean, going back a couple weeks now, but we saw Jordan Howard and the Eagles just absolutely tear them apart. The secondary is the strength of the team. Chargers at home. It maybe I will get to a little. I've been so disappointed with the Chargers on the season, and maybe this is a good buy low spot for a guy like Gordon, whose price is certainly depressed.
So of the $5,000 running backs, I think the three that you should really keep on the tip of your tongue, and I think that all of these guys will go severely under-owned because of the low-end running backs that you can squeeze into your lineup that gives you access to the high end. That's just going to be a very natural build for people. But Derrick Henry at Carolina, we just saw them get gashed on the ground. We know Tennessee wants to run. So I don't love Derrick Henry in general, but $5,700 is a fair price. Jordan Howard at $5,100, not only a revenge game, Ben, but with no Hicks, you can run on the Bears, no problem. And then Melvin Gordon's the other one at $5,000. I think all three of those guys are viable plays.
Derrick Henry is the one that, and I'm with you, I'm not the biggest Derrick Henry guy, but Carolina's basically, now they're dead last DVOA, and he's coming off the most extreme of, he just played the Bucks, and he wasn't terrible, but we just talked about how that's the strength of right now across the league. Tampa really limits the running game. So this should be back to the Titans' bread and butter. Lean on Derrick Henry. I expect a pretty good output against the Carolina run defense that's just really struggling right now.
Yeah, and if you want to do that build from earlier that we talked about and you don't want to use Le'Veon Bell, you want to use Derrick Henry instead, then you have $5,000 per player left.
Oh, yeah. That opens it up a ton. And he's just a guy, game script dependent, of course. He's not going to give you much in the passing game, but we've seen time and time again from him, he can control the game on the ground and certainly pay off this price tag.
Wide receivers, the most expensive receiver of the week, who may or may not even play. I expect Adam Thielen to play, but he gets the matchup against Kansas City, which maybe not be as good for wide receivers as people may think. He's $7,800. It's just such a strange week because DeAndre Hopkins plays in the Sunday morning game, so he's not on the main slate. We don't get Amari Cooper. We don't get any of the Patriots guys. It's just kind of funny to see Adam Thielen be the number one guy. This isn't the first 5 weeks last year. This is this year. He's $7,800. Galladay, Diggs, Lockett, Tyreek Hill, Godwin, Evans, Adams, all in the $7,000 range. Who do you like from that group? Because I think it's Godwin for me.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah. A week after Evans does all the damage. Like, I love, like, my favorite. I'll just say this right now, that if there is a game and you could pick only one to pick players from this week, Tampa-Seattle is that game.
I don't disagree with that. Tyler Lockett, to me, on the other side, should be in a pretty prime thing. You know, I talk over at Awesome all the time about it's tough to look to him at these price tags because he doesn't get the targets to warrant it. But he's so efficient, and if Carson and Seattle is unable to run the ball, it really should open it up for the passing attack. That's the way to attack, the Bucs. So 7,500 for Lockett, I have no problem there. The Bucs, it's just very difficult. Each and every week I chose right, luckily last week with Evans, but him and Godwin seem to, certainly rotate in a way of big games.
I think it's matchup dependent. So anytime that Godwin has the good matchup or doesn't have a difficult matchup, and like whoever's guarding Mike Evans on the outside is like capable to like average, but the slot corner is like bad, they're going to throw to Godwin over and over and over. And that just was the reverse case last week with Tennessee.
Fair enough. God, I still have some sticker shock of seeing Godwin priced over Evans. I know they're comparable this week. I just never really thought of him like that. And his production warrants it. There's no doubt about it. Can you go to Tyreek, you think, at all, if Mahomes is not playing?
I think that you can. I just, amongst all these options, like there's two schools of thought on it. I think that if you play in tournaments and big GPPs and you want to win, having a slate breaking talent like Tyreek Hill on your team, because it only takes 3 catches for him, with Mahomes at least, to break the entire slate. And that might not be exclusive to Mahomes. I mean, it just takes a few deep shots from Moore and all of a sudden you're dancing.
So, Tyreek Hill is the guy, I kind of always relate him to Usti in my mind, where like when he is low owned, it is hard for me not to get over, just because you talked about it on any given slate, he can break 40. No problem. Now the floor is certainly not what it was for various reasons in this matchup, but if we see him significantly under-owned because he's surrounded by guys in better matchups, I'm definitely going to buy on some Tyreek Hill and hope he does break a couple.
Galladay at 7,700 feels like chasing, right?
Definitely. I like that game, no doubt about it. Both secondaries are struggling. That is a big price tag. Not saying he can't pay it off, but that you're asking a lot for a guy. And the thing about the Lions, they have a lot of weapons on the outside. We saw Marvin Jones explode. Amendola gets a lot of work. Hawkinson. And that's assuming that they can't establish on the ground. So probably not for me this week.
That is at 50.5 as a game total right now, the second highest of this entire slate. The problem is I can just see both teams, like the Lions will ineffectively try to run the ball, and then the Raiders will just try to run the ball as much as possible. This just seems like a game that is going to be over really quickly.
It's an interesting game to me. I think there is certainly a viable narrative where it gets up and down a bit, but it's not a team that I love to stack because it's very difficult to peg the production on the Lions side. We'll get to the Raiders as a whole. I certainly have interest. I mean, Daniel Jones tore apart the Lions last week, and I think that Carr and these receivers could have some success. But for Galladay specifically, it's just too premium for me.
In the $6,000 range with probably the best matchup of the week, you have Allen Robinson. Unfortunately, the guy that gets him the ball, he's not so great, but he's $6,800. Odell is right below him against Denver. Then you got T.Y., banged up Keenan Allen, Juju coming off a nice game with not a great matchup against Indy. You got Scorin McLaurin, probably going to be covered by Tre'Davious White, but he's overcome bad matchups in the past and produced some like pretty decent games. It's a bit pricey though. John Brown, Marvin Jones. That's your entire $6,000 range. I don't even know who I like from here. I like Allen Robinson, but he's expensive. After that, Thinking John Brown might be the guy.
Yeah, I like Smokey this week. The Redskins defense is not good in any capacity. They're at home, expected to win this game pretty comfortably. And this is a guy that, even in Baltimore, probably before Lamar Jackson took over, but he's someone that has monster upside. We saw it against the Jets way back in week 1, but only 2 touchdowns on the year. And that's really prevented, some ceiling games from him. The targets have been steady. The receptions have been pretty steady. So I don't mind him at that price tag. Other than that, though, you're right. It's a tough little range. I mean, we know Robinson. I want to say Odell, but the Browns have let me down just so many times already in this short season.
And it does seem like a situation where wide receiver ones against the Broncos have not really fared all that well. And the Broncos have a very clear game plan. They just want to run, milk the clock, and prevent you from running plays.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always more apt to look to the Broncos defense at home and just the way Baker, the Browns are just a mess on so many levels. Now they need this. This is beyond must win mode for them, but that's a whole nother show for another time. Maybe, God, Juju, another one who we saw him, he started slow, then he came alive against Miami. That's a close competitive game against the Colts. And Rudolph, he shows flashes, even though I don't really love the spot for him, to be honest.
Yeah, Odell is going to win someone $1 million at some point this year. I just don't know. Either at this point you play him every week or you just don't play him.
So maybe I should keep playing him because I've been using this guy week in and week out. I've loved the spots. Thought he's been close. He's gotten the targets. Hasn't materialized with the touchdowns really. So maybe I'll look to him. I haven't been looking to Baker, obviously, so he's more of a one-off play than part of a Browns stack.
Well, I think that we didn't even really talk about him, but at $7,100, Devontae Adams could play this week.
Well, if he plays, I'm no doctor, but I was kind of surprised that he's been sitting. I guess maybe this is something they don't want to linger, but if he plays against, again, a Chargers defense that across the board, I always bring it back. Maybe it was just Derwin James' loss because they have just been not good from the start this year. And you look at, the DVOA backs that up towards the bottom of the league defending the pass. So with the Packers offense rolling, you could look to Adams as most people will be looking to Aaron Jones.
If we talk about the builds that we mentioned at running back, the McCaffrey, maybe another high end and a low end running back in your flex or however you want to distribute that, it's more logical that people might pay up for a decent receiver or just hit this $5,000 range where you have like Tyrell Williams, Cortland Sutton, DK Metcalf in a fantastic spot, although the volume is never really there. Scantling, Robbie Anderson, Crowder, the 2 Jets guys. Deshaun Jackson could return this week. Who knows? Then you have Alshon Jeffrey and Sammy Watkins. And Sammy Watkins is below $5,000. But of those guys, I like Tyrell Williams a lot.
Oh, me too. The Raiders are going against a Lions secondary. They have multiple injuries. They traded Diggs. This is a team, like I said, the Giants took advantage of it last week. Raiders at home. There's a lot to like. And Tyrell Williams came back last week and he, wasn't perfect, but he found another touchdown, which just makes it every game he scores, which is kind of ridiculous. And it will regress. But in this matchup at that price tag, I have no problem with it.
The one thing that would concern me is if Slay is active for this and that maybe he just ends up shutting down Williams and you just play Waller.
Yeah, I keep an eye on Darius Slay. Absolutely. He did not play last week. That was one of the many problems that secondary had. But yeah, you could just play Waller, who is a freak. God, I want to say something about Robbie Anderson, but again, this Jets team, it's just, and he has an outrage. His DraftKings picture, I don't know if you've seen Robbie Anderson's DraftKings picture. It is quite a hairstyle he's sporting.
Is it the same? Who was it this week? You're big on these DraftKings player profiles. Who was the guy in golf? Marty Dew?
Yeah, Marty Dew. I'm telling you, man, you gotta infer what's going on here. But I think I know the Jets are a dumpster fire, but they also, as you mentioned earlier, they have the premier matchup. So I don't think we can just simply ignore them because of the struggles of Darnold. You got Anderson and Crowder, 2 guys who do 2 totally different things. One is way more boom and bust than Anderson than Crowder.
If Herndon remains out this week, you could viably play Safe Space Sam, Crowder, and Robbie Anderson all in a lineup. You really could. Like I talked about Miami being the 31st ranked run defense, they're the 32nd ranked pass defense as well. So if you didn't want to use Le'Veon Bell and you want to use the passing game, I don't know if I'm going to do it, but it makes a lot of sense.
I'm probably going to do it on a couple teams. I'm not going to lie. And I think if you really want to take the risk that maybe they adjust, I don't mind using Darnold, Bell, and one of them in that type of thing and hope that Le'Veon gets back to what we used to see him, where he's getting a ton of work through that passing attack. And then you can, I don't know about running it back with somebody,
Parker.
But
it's Parker or Williams. It has to be, right?
It has to be. Yeah, there's nobody. I mean, I guess, what about Walton?
Yeah, I mean, if that's the way that you think that the game flow is going to go, the problem with Walton as a part of that stack is, and maybe he ends up getting the goal line touches and scoring the touchdowns, but if Balaj just comes in and steals like 2 touchdowns from him, you're like, oh, fuck.
Yeah, that could be a serious problem. But that is a game, 2 bad teams, giant range of outcomes, but with middling price tags. And I think, as you alluded to earlier, we're going to see a lot of people with the wide receivers. It's much flatter. So you're going to see a lot of teams have 2 or 3 guys that are 5,000 or 6,000.
What do you do with Metcalf at $5,700? Like, he scored 2 touchdowns last week, and it wasn't even a particularly good DraftKings performance.
No, he's lucky he did that. He's similar to Lockett. I mean, it's the entire Seahawks passing attack. The volume is not secure. Now, when he finds the end zone, of course, I think you have to look to him. I know a lot of people are going to pair probably him and Wilson up. That's going to be a popular game to stack. So I get it. But to me, in terms of just evaluating the plays on their own merit, I prefer guys like Tyrell Williams and maybe even some of the other ones in the same range.
If we go below $5,000, whether it's one-offs or as a part of a stack, where are you looking here? Because I think those Miami guys are somewhat intriguing just because they're so cheap.
Yeah, I think you do have to look kind of to the Dolphins, even though it feels bad. Fitzpatrick at least has moved the offense a bit. Before they called that insane blitz, they had a small chance to actually win a game on Monday. DJ Moore is someone that, I don't mind. The targets have been up 9 over the last 3 games, hasn't materialized into huge outputs, but at the same time, he gets a Titans defense that we've seen struggle. Certainly Mike Evans had his way against them. And at 4,800, I don't think he's going to be popular. So if you don't use McCaffrey, you could try to leverage a bit with another Panther.
The cheaper ones, like Devontae Parker is 44. Preston Williams is 42. Cole Beasley, I just don't like it when Duke Williams is active. It seems like they kind of split up what they do. I know he had a decent week last week, but I think I would rather go to, let's say, like Taylor Gabriel is $3,900. Even Alan Lazard, I think that he actually still has a role on this team, even if Devontae Adams is back.
The Packers are tricky with that because you've got, MVS and Allison, Kumarov, Lazard. There's just a lot of bodies, so I'm going to have to try to infer how that shakes out. Do I even mention a guy that people play? You have no interest in Deshaun Hamilton, right? After thinking he may have a role after getting a 0 last week.
I didn't think that he had a role last week, so
Okay.
I wasn't one of the ones who bit. So I'm sort of agnostic when it comes to Deshaun Hamilton. I can see a merit for it as like, oh, it's a rebound spot, but I just don't think this team throws enough to make it viable. And like, what do you know about Brandon Allen? Is he any good? Probably not is the answer, right?
I know that he went to Arkansas, I believe. That could honestly be wrong, but I believe I've seen him play getting mauled by SEC defenses over a number of years.
So yeah, probably not the best situation.
I don't think so. And I would probably, if I had to play someone sub 4K, to me, it would be Taylor Gabriel. I know Trubisky's been awful, but the Eagles secondary is terrible. This is a guy that he's shown when he gets some targets, he can really make the most of them, and he's always live to break one.
I don't know if I have the guts to do it this week, but I think like a Trubisky, Gabriel, and or Miller plus Robinson with Jordan Howard coming back is an interesting way to start lineups.
That's a Millie type lineup for sure. It kind of reminds me of the Jets in the same way. Nobody wants to do it, but you have to at least consider. The thing about Trubisky, and I know we'll get to quarterbacks, he hasn't been running. And I know he was hurt, now he's back, but like his crazy outputs last year was because he was running all over the place, finding the end zone on the ground.
You'd think that with nothing else working, they might try to return to that.
The Bears, I've been betting the Bears, and spoiler alert, not going well lately. Just awful everything. So honestly, to me, if you can look to those things in large field tournaments because you're getting such leverage and such cheap exposure, but my God, it's been disappointing.
Let's talk about quarterbacks and potential stacks. Russell Wilson is the most expensive quarterback on the slate at $7,100. Mahomes is still $7,000. He's probably not going to play. Well, let's say Mahomes does play. Would you use him?
Yes.
Okay. Would you use him? Would you use him over Wilson or Stafford or Rodgers?
So if Mahomes is going to play, and there's like 1/5 plus in terms of the ownership discount between a guy like him and Wilson, I think using Mahomes with like Tyreek is a very, very interesting and viable tournament spot, just because nobody is going to want to go to him. And I like to embrace those type of things.
So Wilson, Rodgers, Stafford, 71, 69, 68. Then it's Cousins, Allen, Winston. Those are your other $6,000 quarterbacks. I can't see myself building lineups that don't have Jameis Winston in them this week, to be perfectly honest with you. You either get the benefit that this game is a shootout. I've compared it to the Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson clash from a few years ago in that afternoon game, but people were like not hip to that one being a shootout. This one, I think everyone is pretty much in on it, but I think a lot of people will just gravitate towards the Seattle side. And I think that if you stack Jameis, you don't do it with Evans and Godwin. I think you pick one of them and just roll with that, because it doesn't seem like they ever have good weeks at the same time.
It's also what I talked about earlier. That's basically 21,000 of your cap amongst three players. All the production has to, like, if anything goes outside of that, you're in trouble basically, because for them to both hit ceilings, when winning scores are 250 plus these days, it's just too hard to ask. So it's hard not to like Jameis. I mean, he turns the ball over, but that doesn't hurt you. And if he's honestly, him throwing an early pick six might not be the worst thing. You want him trailing, playing comeback. I think it could be a Josh Allen week though. He's been a little quiet, hasn't done as much on the ground. I like the spot for him and John Brown against this Redskins defense.
And then you just hope that he starts rushing in touchdowns from the 1 yard line. Yeah, I don't think that people are going to go to him in what is a very good matchup.
Yeah, I think he's just been a kind of quiet, but he, you look at his game log and it's not that far off. He's finding the end zone on the ground away from one of those big performances. He's been quietly churning out, decent outputs. A home game, they need one sizable favorite, and he is very live to kind of have an explosive game, maybe before people catch up.
I could be talked into that. I just keep looking at Jameis, and like you mentioned, even last week, like he created garbage time in the first quarter for himself to come back and throw for a bunch of yards and touchdowns.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I watched that entire game, and it's amazing. He makes so many narratives that are useful for you. He's going to be popular, but ownership is always somewhat mitigated at quarterback because there's so many options. And of course, you can only choose one. So I don't really worry about that with a guy like Winston.
So the 5Ks, I think you have some interesting options this week because there's a bunch of like crappy quarterbacks with good matchups that you can talk yourself into. We talked about Darnold and the Jet stack. You could even play Ryan Fitzpatrick in a Dolphin stack if you really wanted to. He's only $4,800. Like that stack, you talked about $21,000 for the Tampa guys. If you played Fitzpatrick, Wilson, and Parker, all of a sudden you're looking at like $13,000 for three guys. And you can pay up the rest. Almost very similar to what your Titan stack did last week for what you can do with the rest of your lineup. So Trubisky, he's $5,000. Like he's somewhat live. And I don't think Matt Moore is the worst play in the world either.
I mean, Fitzpatrick, I didn't really consider that, but now I'm kind of thinking that's interesting. Not going to lie. What about I know you mentioned that you really like Tampa and Seattle, but do you not think that Derek Carr is in play, or are you just worried about that game just maybe, as you said, being over too quickly?
I just worry about that game in general, that I know people love Stafford this week. There's no reason not to like Stafford this week. Oakland good against the run, bad against the pass. Lions love to pass. These are two fucking stupid teams that you never know and you just never know what's going to happen with them. So I just assumed the opposite of what the consensus is going to happen in this game. And it's like 10-3. I know it's such a stupid way of looking at it.
No,
but like,
fair enough.
I don't have a ton of interest in any of those guys. And I played a ton of Carr last week too.
Yeah, see, for me, I kind of split the difference. I totally agree. I think a lot of people are going to go to Stafford, and I get it. I actually am more interested in Derek Carr and stacking the Raiders passing attack. I don't know exactly what I want to do in terms of structure of that stack, but I think he's much more playable at this mid-range. And then you did look down. You can really, if you want to punt quarterback, I think this is one of the weeks to do it with guys. You got to be careful, but the Trubiskys of the world, Fitzpatrick's of the world, don't play Brandon Allen, but you do have some really cheap options.
Well, one of the most interesting things to do when we're talking about stacking games or stacking quarterbacks is to find the sneaky stack game, the game that shoots out that no one really kind of expected. I had pegged that as Tennessee and Tampa Bay last week, and it got to the over, but it didn't have quite enough points in it where it really, really paid off, because I had a lot of those Jameis, Evans, Godwin stacks, which I've done for a few weeks now. Like I mentioned, it rarely works out well because all three of them never have a good week on the same week. It's Jameis and one of them, and the other guy does nothing. But this week, like you're looking at, now let me just ask you, 51 is the game total in Tampa Bay and Seattle. 50.5 is the game total for Lions and Oakland. If you had to give a percentage of which game scores the most points, which one would you pick?
Out of those two?
Yeah.
See, I think I feel much more comfortable with the Lions and the Raiders than you.
Oh, really? I just, like, if you just tell me you have, like, the best player in both those games is the quarterback for the Seahawks. The guy puts up points every single week, whether it be through the air or on the ground. And then you have the stupid Bucks who just love garbage time and piling up points there. Like, I could see that game getting to 70.
I mean, I totally get where you're coming from. I really think that it's funny. I just wrote an article over at Osimo about this game, and I think that Seattle is going to not alter their game plan too much, especially if they're able to get a lead. I still expect Carson to get a ton of work, and unless something is altered and they let Wilson drop back a lot more where they're trailing, I think we see another middling game, kind of like we saw against Atlanta last week, where they were in control. Maybe it stays closer than you think, but it doesn't get out of control like we've seen when they've been trailing.
Maybe, but that was a great game for Matt Schaub, 480 yards.
Oh yeah, that's why I'm more interested in the Jameis side of things. No doubt about that. Seattle at home is not what it wants. They have 2 losses this year at home already. I want to say, I looked hard at Brissett, who is a guy, I've had some success targeting at like 1% in a couple matchups, at Houston, but I much prefer him at home in the Dome than on the road in Pittsburgh.
Well, there's such a disparity. I mentioned those 2 games are the only 2 games above 50, and the rest of the games are like 40, 41, except for one of them, which I do think is the sneaky stack game of the week, Packers-Chargers.
So the Chargers, God, I mean, it's amazing that we haven't even mentioned Phillip Rivers, and he's 5,100.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. And he's 5,100. We haven't talked about him, and I doubt that Rivers is going to be on the tip of anyone's tongue this week.
No, definitely not. It's amazing that this is a guy, he used to be one of the locks for, going to grab the bonus and just put up some big numbers. He's got more of his weapons back, Hunter Henry priced up, no doubt, Keenan Allen, Melvin Gordon, Eckler. So if you think that game shoots out, I mean, we've seen the Packers be part of, obviously against the Raiders, they were the play. Maybe that is the sneaky third game, because you're definitely right. This week, there are 2 games that are really polarizing.
So you could do Rivers and either 2 of 3 or 1 of 3, however you want to do it, of Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and or Hunter Henry, and bring it back with Aaron Jones. Like it seems very logical to look at, or you can even do it the other way. Bring Keenan Allen back or Hunter Henry back and go like Rodgers, Devontae Adams, Aaron Jones.
Both ways. I mean, those are the type of stacks that you have to look, and one of the things we have over on the site is a top stacks tool, and you can really see so many games you're able to get leverage on, because the number of people that are going to go with Seattle, Tampa, Oakland, or the Lions is massive. And I get it, and I certainly will be part of that in some capacity, but if you can find another stack outside that, you're going to have really natural leverage.
Tight end is a bit tougher this week. You mentioned Hunter Henry is priced up. Travis Kelce is the most expensive tight end on the board. I mean, if you just got another touchdown, it would have been... he's number 2 in fantasy points this season at tight end?
Really?
At tight end, yeah. It's and it's like Travis Kelce's having like the shittiest season of all time. Like he's on pace for like 1,243 yards or something.
Yeah, it's because I mean, I'm just even looking. He's never great, but he never has a truly complete gutter game either.
Yeah, he's just been super consistent, and we haven't seen his ceiling yet. And it probably doesn't happen until Mahomes comes back. But he's 6,900. Waller is 6,300. Hunter Henry is 6,000. Objectively, I think the best value there is 6,300 for Darren Waller. But then there's no one in the 5,000s, and it's Ertz, Jimmy Graham, Vance McDonald, and Chris Herndon in the 4s. And you have the Titans guys, Delaney Walker and Jonnu Smith. Delaney Walker may or may not play, 39, 38. And then Hawkinson in that stack game is $3,700. Like, what do we do at tight end? Like, do you use, like, if Herndon sits, do you use Ryan Griffin and chase that? Do you go back to Cameron Brate? Noah Fant, I actually think, is in play here. Shitty quarterbacks like tight ends, and that seemed to be the biggest benefit of Emmanuel Sanders leaving was Fant ended up with more targets.
Noah Fant is a guy that the targets are starting to mass. He just hasn't done much with it. So you can look there. Vance McDonald is someone that I really thought was more poised for a big year, but I don't know if it's Big Ben going down. The target's not really there. The production's certainly not there. He gets a great matchup, but God, I don't know. And then, I mean, have we seen any? Is OJ Howard? I know this is. He's out. Is he ruled out again? I don't believe I've seen. I know he's got a Q tag.
Yeah, he has not been officially ruled out as of yet, but hamstring injuries tend to linger, so I would expect him to not play.
Yeah. Boy, it's pretty bad. I mean, depending on how you build, of course, my preference would be to get up to Waller or Kelce, guys that we feel very confident with. I have tried to buy on Zach Ertz. I thought the Goddard thing was maybe more smoke and mirrors than we thought, but it really has not been materializing. He just is not a focal point of this offense right now.
Yeah, maybe it just seems like defenses are taking out Zach Ertz and leaving Dallas Goedert to just wander around by himself. Eventually, once you start looking at film, like, hey, that one guy is killing us. Maybe we should cover him too. Then maybe it opens up something for Ertz.
And that's in my mind, that's what I keep thinking is happening. But lately, it's certainly not materializing. I mean, I looked, God, can I even, do I dare say Kyle Rudolph?
No, don't say that. Big Irv's better than Kyle Rudolph.
Fair enough. I'm just looking down the list, like Dawson Knox, no. Gesicki, no.
I got one for you. He's a candidate for 0 points, obviously. But I think Greg Olsen against Tennessee is super sneaky.
Yeah, Greg Olsen. I'm always a Greg Olsen guy. He hasn't broke his foot yet, which is good. Yeah, at home, we'll see. Kyle Allen is a little up and down for me. DJ Moore is probably my preference, but if you're not taking one of the guys we mentioned up top, you're not going to find anyone that you're going to feel great about this week at tight end. It just doesn't exist.
So do you just say if Delaney Walker is out, use Jonnu?
I mean, Jonnu was great last week. Absolutely did his thing. I'm pretty comfortable going there. Now he's a little priced up relative to, someone like, if you're price sensitive, you're getting a discount on like a guy like Noah Fant, and I don't think the production gap is that different. Yes, Jonnu Smith is certainly more likely to outscore him, but I may look to a guy like Fant if I'm really in a jam and if I pay up for that double running back.
So what about if Herndon is active?
Oh, if Herndon is active, so that's a guy that I definitely have interest in. Pending that we get word that he's not going to be limited in any way, I could use him in potentially the Darnold stacks, and I think that would even add to the creativity of them.
Yeah, I think you could probably use him as a one-off too. He's just been so involved in this offense when healthy with Darnold. But if he's out, like, do you actually take a flyer on Ryan Griffin in a plus matchup?
It is so obviously point chasing, but at the same time,
yeah, but there's a big difference of point chasing with Kenny Golladay at $7,800 or point chasing with Ryan Griffin, and no one's going to play anyway at like $3,300.
Yeah, 4 targets, 2 touchdowns. That'll play, but it again, you know what I think can kind of justify it is that matchup. I know we're beating it to death, but like the Dolphins are just inept across the board. If Darnold is going to have a game, he has limited options out there, and Ryan Griffin is someone that should be somewhat involved.
Yeah, watch it be a Demaryius Thomas game.
Dear God. Yeah,
They like throwing to him.
they do. It's just, yeah, tight end is so, I mean, Seattle, of course, Seattle doesn't really have one anymore with Disley gone. That's, I guess, a way that you could, but you can't really go to Luke Wilson or Hollister.
I want to see the snap share. I want to look that up with the snap. Do you have those in front of you by chance?
No, I don't.
Where's stinky Seattle here? Here we go. Let's see what they did last week. I mean, that's a game where they were up the entire game, so maybe more blocking than anything else. But Wilson played 70% of the snaps last week.
I mean, it's a great matchup, but one target, it's tough. You just, again, if you're reaching that far down, I think you're doing it if you're rolling a bunch of Seattle stacks and you say, you know what, I want to make sure I'm mixing and matching here. Maybe you look to that. But other than that, I think the prudent play, go with some of the more known commodities where at least the target share is justifiable.
Defenses, we talked about the Redskins being the cheapest defense on the board at $1,800. They're playing the Bills. You can basically play anyone against the Bills and get fantasy points. So that's actually a very logical answer for me of if you want to pay up everywhere else, roll the dice. Maybe you get a fumble 6 from Josh Allen and boom, like you win the week. If it's not the Skins at $1,800, who are we going with here? Because the Bills are the most expensive. Probably don't want to pay all the way up for them. You can talk yourself into Seattle because of Jameis turnovers. I don't care if they give up a bunch of points. But the one I really like is the Browns. The Browns at Denver, like the Browns still have a good defense. Like they'll get to the quarterback. And if Brandon Allen's the guy back there, just unleash.
So that's the area that I'm looking to attack as well. You just mentioned that. I think you could flip it if you want to be against the grain. The Broncos defense, after the most anomaly start I've ever seen, are starting to get pressure. They are back at home. Baker, turnover prone, they can get pressure as well on the Browns. So 2 mid-range there, and I'll throw one more in Carolina. You know, Tannehill is
second in the league in sacks against the worst offensive line. It's the best DVOA defensive line adjusted sack rate of the week versus the worst offensive line. So that makes a lot of logical sense. I'm with you.
Yeah, so that's and that's exactly what I'm looking for. Can you get opportunities for pressure, for turnovers? Ideally, of course, I'd love to pay up, but one of the first ways I look to save salary is that defense, and I think I'll do that once again this week.
And you're not even really paying all the way down. It's $2,800. Like that's fine. So yeah, I think the Eagles are super interesting too. I know they have a shitty defense, but if you're not going to use the Trubisky stack on the Bears, maybe just play Philly's D and go against it.
So I do think this is a week, and I want to be clear about this. There are multiple games that I have interest in the quarterback, and then on other teams, I will have the defense playing them. Redskins will be one. Bears like that, you know, the Eagles, you can do that because obviously Seattle and Jameis, Jameis could have a monster game. He could also have 5 turnovers. So you want to be cognizant that it's one of those weeks where on different teams, different builds.
So just looking at it right now, the top 5 teams in adjusted sack rate for defensive line: San Francisco, Carolina, Pittsburgh, New England, and Kansas City at the moment. After that, Cleveland, the Giants, the Saints, Jacksonville, and Minnesota. Are we convinced that the Kansas City offensive line with Fisher back has like vastly improved? Can Minnesota get to Matt Moore?
They might be able to generate some pressure. I wish they were at home. I'd have a little more interest inside. You know, the Vikings at home have been really good and they're playing very well. But for me, you're not getting, you're evaluating straight up against teams like Carolina, Denver, even, the Eagles and things like that. It's only a couple $100 more. So I have them behind that. I get the merit if you think they can get to Matt Moore, but I don't love the spot as much as I like some of those other ones.
I'm just trying to figure out, because I feel like Carolina is going to be incredibly popular. Maybe that's the move, but I just don't like playing chalk defenses. Feel like there is leverage in just gambling on another one.
Oh, 100%. I mean, defense, it's been a ridiculous year where the Patriots somehow get there every week. I'm glad we don't have to deal with that, but more often than not, you just want to give yourself some opportunities for turnovers and things like that. And eventually, you get the right defense at the right time.
I'd say Pittsburgh or Indy just because of their ability to get to the passer, but both their offensive lines are so good at pass protection that I don't know how much pressure is going to be generated.
That's a game that I really look to because I wanted to get, have something to say in terms of a stat. I really think it's a grinded out game with not a lot of excitement on any, facet of it. So I'm with you. The Browns that you mentioned, maybe that is a way. I don't think they're going to be that popular. Maybe with Brandon Allen, they'll get a boost, but they should really be able to put some pressure on the Broncos.
Yeah, I think if I was like to rank them value-wise along with ownership, the Browns, Carolina, and then Washington down at the bottom is where I'm going to go with. But if I just look, like the Packers are somewhat interesting too, just because they have such a good pass rush. But shockingly, Rivers hasn't been dropped a bunch this week. But if we look at the worst offensive lines in the league right now, at least the ones playing on this slate, you have Tennessee is the worst. They're tied with the Jets in giving up the most sacks so far. They've given up 34 sacks to this point. And Tannehill, he loves himself a sack and a turnover. It didn't really manifest with Tampa Bay last week, but Tannehill threw 2 picks on one drive, and they both got called back at one point. So he's willing to turn the ball over, and Carolina can get to you. So Carolina, from that perspective, works out really well. I mean, Tampa Bay has a terrible offensive line. So does Miami. So do the Jets. So does Carolina. Carolina is 23rd in year. They've given up 23 sacks. They're 23rd in offensive line. Like, Tennessee gets pressure. Maybe Tennessee could be a move here.
I mean, Tennessee, if you're playing a lot of defenses, to me, they're in that next tier. You're going to be alone on an island if you play them, and they at least have some merit in terms of maybe they can get some. Kyle Allen is not above, turning it over. Now, the Niners defense, they make everybody look bad. But other than that, I mean, we'll have to wait and see on him. But I don't hate that. I don't know how many different defenses I'll need.
Yeah, I'll probably play that 3-team core: Browns, Carolina, Redskins, and just see who fits in what.
Yeah, the nice thing this week is I have a defense that I'm comfortable with at every tier. If I need a cheapie, I like the Redskins. If I need a mid-range, I like the Broncos. I like the Panthers. If I can get all the way up, Bills and Seattle make obvious plays.
I don't know if the Bills do or not. They feel like more of a solid defense rather than like an attacking defense.
So to me, they're if you had the money, a clear cash defense in the sense their floor is probably higher just because they should be winning. They're at home. In terms of breaking the slate, I mean, there's no argument that Jameis is the prime matchup for any quarterback, opposing defense. So I get you there. Buffalo to me is, I mean, I think the spread's a little much too, but 9.5 is 9.5 at home.
I guess it also depends on who's starting at quarterback for Washington too. But is it Haskins?
No, I'm saying if it is
yeah. But if it is Haskins, yes, you get the ability to pick on Haskins. But the Redskins might just say, screw this, we're just going to run even if we're down. And that's not good for anybody. No,
that's not. To a point, though, if Josh Allen and them can really put pressure on, they will be forced to throw, and then it could be really ugly for the Redskins.
All right. Ben Rasa, thanks for being on, man. Twice in 1 week. Get the bump.
Got the bump. That's what I'm here for. Yeah, week 9. This was fun, as always. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I got some fun guests lined up for the next few weeks for the DraftKings show. Then you're going to have to come back on because we got a week off of golf. It's fantastic.
It is fantastic. Just a rest week. Focus on other things. College basketball is starting. A lot of things going on in the world. So Breeders' Cup, very busy week. I'm glad there's no golf next week.
So you follow you for Breeders' Cup info. And are you diving into college basketball, like starting right away?
So I've been prepping mostly on the betting side because I bet a lot of college basketball. So definitely plan to do that. And I will have some content over at Awesemo. If you're looking to check out some games, maybe have some fun wagers, keep it interesting at night.
All right. Ben Rasa, follow him on Twitter at JazzRazDFS and check him out at awesemo.com. I'm Pat Mayo. Follow me at the PME on all of the social medias. Play in the Pat Mayo Experience DraftKings Open. Link in the description of this video or podcast. I told you about the giveaways, both video and audio. And check out EstablishTheRun.com. Mayo 20 gets you 20% off. Seems like a pretty good deal. All right, I'm Pat Mayo. My cheat sheet will be available on DKPlaybook.com on Friday for the Week 9 main slate. All right? Pat Mayo. I'll see you next time.
Mayo Experience! Experience!